On a mission given to me by Woody Shaw, Sunship, Dizzy, and John Kahn, dedicated to pursuing a piece of our cultural heritage through interviews with my music heroes, this is The Jake Feinberg Show. Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace at 2919 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. Happy Saturday afternoon to everybody out there. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today. My show revolves around the 4 L's: leadership, love, life, and lineage, and the ongoing story of real music made by real musicians. My guest today is the drummer for one of the most recognized psychedelic rock bands in our country's history. The band was already intact when a young woman named Janis Joplin came aboard from Texas with an unpretentious style in the same mold as Ron McKernan, Jorma, Kaukonen, and David Bromberg. Her style was unique, and she gravitated to the Bay Area where the folk rock scene was burgeoning with open-minded musicians who were drinking bathtubs full of LSD. The whole vibe was less uptight than the New York folk scene that reeked of uniformity and hierarchy, starting with Dave Van Ronk, Eric von Schmidt, and a certain way to play the music. My guest came from the East Coast and was already expressing himself through painting. He was steeped in spiritual Native American drumming that focused on rhythm patterns of transcendence as the peyote soaked their veins while Jim Pepper played Whitchy-Tai-Toe.
Hello?
My guest was also a first-rate jazz drummer, idolizing the work of Larry Bunker, Hal Blaine, Emil Richards, and Milt Holland. He brought these chops into the holding company, whose instrumental sound became a progressive mix of folk, psych, rock, and soul. His painting remained as he used his brushes the way Elvin Jones or Philly Joe might use them. Swing the band like David Garibaldi or Greg Errico, Billy Kreutzmann, Michael Shreve, Lenny White, George Marsh, Mike Clark, Jerry Grinelli, and Gaylord Birch. Just another whistle stop. Dave Getz, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show. And we've lost Mr. Getz momentarily here as we get him back on the air. You know, David was a fantastic painter even before he really started to pick up the drums. And as a result, you know, had something to fall back on. When he came out to the West Coast, he actually saw the first incarnation of Big Brother and the Holding Company at the Trips Festival in 1966 as an audience member. And then he actually wound up taking over the drum chair and coming in and really and just taking the band to a whole new level. And I think we got him back on the air. Dave Getz, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hello?
How you doing, man?
Yeah, good. I need you to speak a little louder or make your end a little higher for me.
No problem, my man. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you?
It's great to hear you, man. You know, I wanted to ask you if you could talk a little bit about growing up in Flatbush and how you connected with the Native American community there.
That's great. That's a great question. That is such a great question for me, because I don't get to talk about that much. Most people, right away when they ask me anything, it's like starts out with Janis, you know.
Well, you know what, man? If you follow the Jake Feinberg show at all, it is always about asking people about things they've never been asked about. So it's your turn now, my friend.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, let me start out by saying I lived in Flatbush, and somewhere within my neighborhood, not far away, on a street called Nostrand Avenue, for people who are familiar with Brooklyn, on Nostrand Avenue, there was a shop called the Gray Owl Indian Craft Supply Company. And one of the things, when I was 11, 12, I joined the Boy Scouts. Actually, even before that, when I was like in the third grade in public school, it would be a class on one of the afternoons called library, where kids would go to the library and pick out a book, and you'd read. And I found these books by a guy named Charles Willard Schultz, who wrote about the Blackfeet Indians before the white man came. There was these, fictional stories, but they really fired my imagination. They were just my favorite books, and I read all the books by Charles Willard Schultz. So later on, I joined the Boy Scouts when I was probably about 11, 12, and I started to make lanyards, these things that go around your neck, and Boy Scouts wear and things like that. So this place, Gray Owl Indian Craft Supply, was in my neighborhood, and I didn't realize at the time, I was just a kid, I didn't realize this is like such a special place. It was like one actually of two places in the entire United States that sold and made Indian costumes and crafts for Indian costumes. But what they also sold there was plastic stuff for making lanyards, and so all the kids in the Boy Scouts would go there and buy their lanyards. And I just became fascinated with this place because I would see this guy, Gray Owl, whose American name was Don Miller. I would see him making war bonnets and things like that, and it just blew my mind. So I started to hang out there in this store. And he had a troupe, like a dancing troupe, a sort of a kind of like a folkloric, you could call it, kind of thing, that did Native American dances, and everybody in the troupe, there were only a few kids and myself, and his brother-in-law was in it, but it was called Heyoka Indian Dancers, and I joined this troupe, and I made myself an Indian costume. Actually, I would go up I had a friend who was also in it. His name was Bruce Byrne, who became a leading physicist kid. Anyway, we were both in the Boy Scouts together, and we would go up to the Museum of the American Indians, which was the Hayden Foundation. It was at that time, it was up on 111th Street in Manhattan. It's moved, and it's now a much bigger thing. But at that time, we used to love to go up there, and we would go up with graph paper, and we would copy Indian designs and things like that. And we would look at the on the second floor was the whole South American native section, and they had shrunken heads. And for a kid of 11 and 12, a shrunken head's the greatest thing you've ever seen. So we were really stoked about it, and we would sit. Both of us would sit in this store on Nostrand Avenue, and we would work for him. We would stamp envelopes and stuff envelopes with catalogs and just help out in any way we could while he would teach us how to do beadwork and how to, make moccasins and all of that stuff. So by the time I was like 11, 12, 13, I had made myself an Indian costume. And anyway, the long story short was we would perform at school assemblies and Elks Lodges and things like that, and do this stuff. And everybody in the troupe would have to, at some point, play the drum, which was just basically a hoop drum, and you just a very simple beat of just boom, doom, boom, doom, kind of a loud, soft, kind of a pulsing rhythm. And I was kind of the good one at it. I just had it. I just had natural rhythm. And that eventually led me to playing drums, because then I got into junior high school, and somewhere while I was in junior high school, that Heyoka Indian Dancers performed at the school assembly, and some kids approached me and said, we're starting a band. This kid's father owned a local music studio, and he played clarinet and sax. The other kid played accordion, and they needed a drummer, and they said, you got rhythm. You should be the drummer in our band. So this kid's father called my mother and said, we want your son to be in the band, and would you give him drum lessons? And my parents said, okay, yeah, sure. And so that was it. So then I became a drummer at 15, and by the time I was 15, I was in the Union 802, and I was playing in the Catskills and hotels and stuff like that.
Why don't you? This is phenomenal. Talking to Dave Getz, who really an incredible drummer, and but really was a passionate artist, and using his hands, obviously. But did you actually wind up ever in traditional Native American ceremonies in the playing drums?
No, I never made it out to I never made it out to any places like South Dakota or Oklahoma until much later when I was traveling with Big Brother. But I always loved the culture, and I always it was just something that was just part of my life that I just identified with from very early on. I think with little boys, when you're growing up, you're like most of the boys, had cowboy outfits. I wanted to be an Indian. I just identified with that side of things.
Sure.
I think that was it.
What when you say you agreed, you fell on that side of things? What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean the whole culture of the Native American culture, and especially the Plains Indians, the Sioux, the Blackfeet, some of the Cheyenne tribes. It was a very spiritual thing for me. It just kind of like connected with me when I read these books when I was in the third grade. It hit some spiritual chord in me about nature and about closeness to the earth and about the right way to live. And I kind of understood intuitively from very early on that what happened in the West and the destruction of the genocide that happened against the Indians, I understood that when I was like 11 or 12. Most people didn't understand it.
And these were based
later
right.
in the 60s, you know what I mean,
right.
when it sort of became a hip thing to know that. But I got that very early on. I identified with that culture, and I understood the spirituality and the values of that culture, and the value toward nature and art and the respect for art and music and things like that.
Well, okay. So what about when do you think you were ahead of the curve? Do you attribute that knowledge to those books that you were reading when you took out those books?
I think the books was the first place where I connected to it, and something like that. I don't know why. I don't know why those books, how I found them. I don't remember, but there was a whole school library filled with books, and for some reason these books found me.
Mm-hmm.
And,
that's great.
And that's the way it was.
Well, what about, I've done an incredible amount of work with, finding these unheralded percussionists, like Candido, still 90 years young, or, Ray Mantilla, on and on and on. And
Mickey Roker.
Well, Roker playing the trap set, but I'm talking about like the idea of diaspora and the idea of the communication through the drum. And I believe that Native American drumming is very similar. I mean, when did that sink in that you realized that was their own language and that was the language that you wanted to, because obviously it's completely antithetical to the Western language.
Yeah, I mean, that kind of what you're talking about, that kind of understanding, I think really didn't happen until later, in my life, probably maybe in my 30s, even my 40s, when, I started to kind of really look at drumming in a different way. In the beginning, when I first got into it, I was a kid, and I just had natural rhythm, and I loved things like Gene Krupa, and I loved, the stuff that kids listened to then, and coming up in the early 50s, and the mid-50s, Gene Krupa, Buddy Rich, and then I got turned on to jazz. Like when I was about 15 or 16, I started to listen to West Coast jazz and people like Shelly Manne, and then I started to discover other stuff, and I became like a big Max Roach. Max Roach was my hero for a while.
I love it.
And people like that, and I got into bebop, and my understanding of music became more complex and deeper, I think. But that's kind of what it was. I didn't see drumming itself. I didn't understand the drumming on a philosophical level until much later, when I really, started to think about it in some way. Maybe after Big Brother, even after the '60s, and people like Mickey Hart became a friend of mine. I we became friends in the 60s, and I saw where he was going with it. And his book was great. His book was really kind of, a lot of people were starting to think that way. And I had that background already in some sense. So I love that stuff. And I love thinking about drumming as not necessarily just a spiritual pursuit, but as a way of connecting with something that's in the universe. It's like a force. It's like a part of nature. It's part of ourselves, and it has just a lot of aspects to it. But as a kid, as a young person, and even in the 20s, I wasn't focused on that. I was more focused on rock and roll and playing hard and power and the things that were necessary to kind of make Big Brother kind of the sound that we had.
Yeah, but I mean, at the core, Dave Getz is, it's like Larry Bunker. I saw you in one of my posts on Facebook with Bill Evans.
Yeah.
You threw up that thing about Bunker. Those cats, I interviewed Hal Blaine. Those guys were incredible because they didn't even get accompanist credits on the albums. So, Beach Boy, they just saw their families gravitating economically, and they just didn't really, but I want to ask you, going back here, I interviewed Randy Weston last year, and he talked about going up to the Catskills, and that's where he met Olatunji, and that's where he met Melba Liston. And I'm curious about your interactions with some of the heavyweights, especially, because there was such an active jazz scene. Ornette Coleman had a school. I don't know. Take us through that Catskill scene and how you grew as a musician from that.
There was an interesting thing when I was there. Of course, we're talking about 1955 to 1959 were my years there, and I knew there were some good players. There were some great players in different places. I mostly was playing in bands in smaller hotels, or medium-sized hotels, but there were, of course, places like the Concord and Grossingers, these bigger hotels that had Latin bands and had several bands. They'd have like a lounge band, a trio, jazz trio, then they'd have a Latin band, then they'd have a, dance society orchestra, a la kind of Lester Land and Dave Terrace, kind of things like that.
Sure.
So one of my friends at that time that I grew up with in Brooklyn and played with a lot in Brooklyn was a cat named Mark Weinstein. And Mark was a trombone player and a bass player, and he got, I think probably when we were 16, I was playing with some band, a dance band. We were, trying to play jazz. We were kids, our idea of jazz was a little kind of, simplified. But anyway, Mark got into a Latin band in some big hotel in Swan Lake, and he was like the first person who ever turned me on. I remember him telling me, he had smoked grass, and it was just like, blew his mind, and he was going to turn me on. So, and he got turned on by all these Latin players, these Puerto Rican cats, in this Latin band. So he started playing. And anyway, long story short on that one, it was Mark wound up. Mark is still a major, player. He's in New Jersey, and he's got 6 or 7 albums, and he played with everybody. But after that, he wound up eventually when he was about 19 in Eddie Palmieri's band.
Wow.
With a guy named Barry Rogers. And Barry Rogers and Mark Weinstein really created the 2-trombone sound that became very dominant in Latin music and salsa music of that time. It's still there. It's still used a lot, the 2-trombone sound. But they created it. Mark Weinstein and Barry Rogers in Eddie Palmieri and Charlie Palmieri, too, probably. They played with all that stuff. And I reconnected with Mark a few years ago. I was at this place called Jazz Camp West, and I met John Santos, who's I
interviewed John. Yeah, I know John.
Yeah, John is really a scholar of Latin music.
Definitely.
And I was talking, and I knew that at some point it came up that John had played with Eddie Palmieri, and I said, do you know Mark Weinstein? And he said, of course. Really, we were close friends. We roomed together and everything. I said, give me his number. I want to get... So anyway, when I was back in New York in, I think, 2003 with Big Brother, I called him and we reconnected. But anyway, there were other people. We used to go on Thursday nights in the Catskills during the summer. There was a place called the Woodburn Tavern in Woodburn, which is, one of the towns there, and they had open jams, and I, heard incredible players play. I couldn't tell you all their names, and a lot of them you never heard of because they kind of disappeared or they got strung out or whatever. But they were great players. Really, just a lot of great players would show up, and they would be guys who were playing in the different bands at the Concord or Fieldstone or Gross Singers, all the bigger hotels.
I'm obsessed with Barry Rogers. That guy. I mean, not in the. You kind of just dropped some knowledge on me because I didn't realize that they created that 2-trombone sound. I just know him as this monster session trombone player for all these psych funk bands from the early.
And Mark Weinstein switched to flute. He gave up playing trombone, gave up playing bass, and had a period of time where he was kind of out of it, and then all of a sudden he told me this story. He said he saw somebody playing flute one day on a beach with a lot of chicks gathered around him, and he said, "I'm going to do that." And he became like a master. He became a master within a certain amount of time, and he's got check him out. He's got 6 or 7 albums out there.
There's nothing like a bunch of women around you to get you fired up to play an instrument.
Yeah, no, it was a funny story,
So, Dave, I interviewed John Perry Barlow last week, and we spent a good deal of time talking about mind expansion. And I really wanted you to talk a little bit about the first time that you played music where you used psychedelics, you became the music, and then you ultimately transcended the music.
Well, Big Brother wasn't a band that played a lot on psychedelics. In fact, we nicknamed ourselves at one point the Alkadelic Band. It's a funny phrase.
I love it.
But we used to
Alkadelic.
In the early days of Big Brother, we all used, even Janis sometimes, but we all, except for Peter, the bass player, who was fairly straight with drugs, but we would go out on a window somewhere and all smoke a joint and go play, But none of us ever really dropped acid before, a set. A couple of times I was dosed accidentally and played, music that way. But I think I don't know about that. I have different feelings about it. I probably only took, I think I maybe took acid 20 times maybe, Not a lot by comparison to people like in the Dead, where they took it hundreds of times and played many, many shows on it.
I shouldn't, because I didn't really word that the right way. I mean, to me, I don't know how you would really function on an instrument tripping out on acid. But I'm more interested in. I just feel like we're becoming more and more of a square society, and I'm not trying to promote a massive amount of. I'm not looking to reconstitute the acid test, but I just want you to talk. Even the times that you were just sort of dosed without knowledge, talking about the emotive feelings, ultimately the expansion of the mind or the connection that you might have had, I guess before you joined the band, you saw them at the Trips Festival. So I'm just trying to figure out the transcendent quality of it, how you can become something and then ultimately transcend it. For my generation and for my daughter's generations, I just would love you to talk as best you can about that.
Huh. Jake, I can only, tell you, give you specific stories. I think the first time I took psychedelics, I had just come back from living in Europe for a month. It was in 1965. I had come back, and the woman I had been living with had joined something called the League for Internal Freedom. And at that time, LSD was still legal. So you could get it by belonging to the League for Internal Freedom. So she had taken it, and she was a person who was very into Jungian philosophy, Jungian analysis, things like that. And, she had taken it, and it was like pharmaceutical acid. It was Sandoz acid.
Right.
And then it gave it to me, and my first trip was really done in a very, legitimate way with the Tibetan Book of Dead, and the whole thing, the whole routine, where I really stayed in a room, and I really went into myself in some way that was just unbelievable. And one of the things I remember connecting with was I connected with something, the black part of myself.
Wow.
I don't know how to explain that, but I connected with what was inside me that was like the African part and the Jewish part and the kind of all of these like genetic things almost that were somewhere way, way deep inside. Later on, when I took it, and that was an incredible experience. That changed my life completely.
Can you
and
just
it was
try?
after that I went to things like the Trips Festival and things like that and got high. But later on, one of the things if nothing else, when you do something like that, one thing you have to realize is that what we see in our normal waking life is just like one surface. It's one reality. That there's other realities going on different levels underneath all of it that we're most of the time unaware of. And I think that's the big thing that almost everybody has to realize. It's like no matter where you're coming from or what your education is, there's some part of you that knows that now certain things are being revealed that I don't see or feel or understand at all in my normal waking consciousness. Some things are going on that were just, under other levels, sub-levels of what's going on in nature and in the world and in my mind and with people and between people and everything. All these patterns in some way that are deeper patterns that we become aware of. So, that's probably, I don't know about, what you want to transcend. I guess, when you're talking about transcending, it's sort of, I don't know if I, consciously transcend. I changed, my life changed over time, but it was going in that direction anyway. And I think that something like LSD was sent to us in some way to kind of like, it's sort of like the last stage of a rocket or something. It's the booster rocket that launched us into another sort of place as a generation, and that has changed the world too. There's no question about it. That it's people who talk about the '60s as a sort of a failure, as a sort of a failed experiment. I mean, it's ridiculous because look around.
It's the farthest thing from the truth.
Everything now, everything's affected by what the seeds of what were planted in the mid '60s.
And thanks to the advent of modern medicine, cats like yourself and Terry Haggerty and Mickey Hart and other cats that are honest and can talk about this stuff lucidly, because I just feel like, I guess the point is that as we move into the age of, we're fully in the age of digitization. And there seems to be more of a lack of introspection among individuals that I've ever seen. People that are kind of void of feeling and emotion. And I feel like with acid, LSD, especially in this purest form, when it was legal, the ability to really have that would take you and make you completely introspective. I mean, you had to look inside yourself, and it was just humbling. And I think that no matter what kind of background you came from, whether you knew you were being dosed or not, or how you philosophically viewed the world, it really loosened people up. And it's marginalized now. Yeah, it's some hippie thing. It was part of that failed experiment. To me, it's like this is exactly what. It's just a huge part of my show. I feel like it goes a long way towards. I mean, I'd like you to extrapolate as best you can. If you can't really put it into words about the African side of you, if you could talk about how that experience actually changed your life. Yeah,
that's a very big topic, because in some way it was scary.
Yeah,
it's something that frightened me, because I grew up in some kind of like my family wasn't religious. They were, kind of on the edge, but they were very Jewish culturally, I would say. And my grandparents were definitely immigrants, and some of my aunts and uncles had not been born in the country. And there was a lot of so there's a lot of old world kind of Jewish thing that was there. And then the black thing was something that really surprised me that was there, because growing up, I think there was, kind of a fear in some way of black culture and what black people represented. At the same time, there was this incredible attraction to it that I felt. Similar in some way to the Native American thing, but different. Another thing that's much more sensual, much more. It's more violent, and it's more in some way aggressive and really forceful. It's an incredible force that's there inside. You know, I'm me anyway. That probably that I connect to through the drums, you know. That's I don't know. I mean, I feel it in a lot of things. I feel, you know, still. I don't know how to get there with it, how to talk about it.
No, you're doing a great job. I want to tell you, you're doing great.
I definitely feel, you know, a connection to black culture, and it speaks to me.
Yeah.
It just speaks to me in some way.
Because I think it's authentic. Because I think it's visceral, and I think it just kind of is, you know, when you watch the polyrhythmic displays of someone like Elvin Jones, again, he is there's only one Elvin Jones, but I know that, I mean, to me, it's being born in 78 and sort of growing up in a much more square, less Afrocentric jazz component. I just, it seems more tepid. When you were really coming up, it was just visceral. And of course it was brand new. So when cats like Olatunji were playing, I mean, it was just like blowing the doors off the place. It just, you know, you grew up in the greatest era of music and humanity. I mean, I guess that's what you know, why did you were part of the Union, 802, you were cooking, you were rocking out the Shelly Man and Charlie Mariano and having a ball. And why did you wind up moving to the West Coast?
That's a whole other story. That's but let me just say something about what you just, because I was in the beginning when I, you know, started to listen to jazz and I was 15, and I heard, you know, Chico Hamilton and Shelly Man and Shorty Rogers and those guys, and I thought really good. Some of the first stuff I heard, Jerry Mulligan Quartet, which still I listen to now and I love.
Right.
But somewhere along the way, as I started to get more serious as a drummer and started to hang out with other guys in New York who were, you know, contenders, young players who were really going to be good players, like Mark Weinstein and people I mentioned. Ronnie Cuber was another one who was around the scene that I was in.
Oh, definitely. I love Ronnie.
The emphasis, everybody started to really get hip that New York jazz and black jazz and hard bop was really where it was at. And that, you know, West Coast jazz, for all its, you know, perfection and smoothness, was kind of insipid. I don't know if I feel this way anymore. I mean, I kind of can listen to it more, the whole thing more objectively. But as a 15, 16-year-old, I wanted to be on the cutting edge. I wanted to be where it was happening. And so I really sort of went from listening to Shelly Man and Shorty Rogers and Chico Hamilton and Dave Brubeck and all of that to listening to Horace Silver and, you know, and Sonny Rollins and, you know, stuff like that.
The burning blues kind of
Bird
stuff.
And, you know, really getting into black music and really wanting to play like that, you know.
Okay,
so anyway,
this is so important.
What was the next thing was how I went to the West Coast. Okay, so I studied art. I really, at some point, I decided I didn't really want to be a musician. I wanted to be an artist, and I was always good in both these things. I always excelled in school. I was sort of the best artist in my high school and stuff like that. So I went to Cooper Union. I got into Cooper Union as an art student. And after I finished Cooper Union, I did not have a degree. I had just a diploma, and I went up to this like an art school in Maine called Skowhegan. It's a well-known place, and art students get scholarships to it from all over the country and come in there. And they also have people who pay a lot of money to go there. But it's a wonderful place in central Maine. So I was out there, and the guy who had won the scholarship from the West Coast, from the California School of Arts, was a guy named Jack Massey. And Jack and I became friends. We went drinking together. We were both, he was like maybe 22, I was 20, and we got crazy together, and, you know, we just connected. And I had been accepted to Yale. I was going to go to Yale Art School to get my degree, and I was going to go there. And I blew it off. And Jack Massey said, "Come on out to San Francisco, Getz, and you can stay at my house." and I just literally, I came back from the art school in Maine, Skowhegan, and I got in my car. I had a 1949 Plymouth, and I took a lot of speed, and I drove in about, I don't know what it was, like 35 hours or something like that. I drove to San Francisco.
Unbelievable. Okay, time out.
With Jack Massey, who at that time called himself Jim Massey. But anyway, I stayed on his couch, and he was married and had 2 kids, and his wife didn't want me there. So I had to get out, and I had to go. I had already registered to go to art school. At that time, the California School of Arts was changing its name to the San Francisco Art Institute. So I went and I registered there, and I went to about 5 classes, and they said, "You have to pay us the rest of the tuition." I had no money, and I was basically had to get out on the street. And so I went and got a job in the post office, and I worked in the post office for 11 months in San Francisco, and I got an apartment, and I didn't go to art school, and I was just living in San Francisco. And anyway, then I went back to New York, and I decided I hated San Francisco. It was too soft. It was too easy.
It was too soft.
I didn't like it.
It was too soft.
And I went back to New York for the summer of 1961, and I went looking for a job. And I couldn't find a job, and it was like I was out on the street, and I was staying at home with my parents. And I said, "Fuck it, I'm going back to San Francisco." And I went back to San Francisco, and I got a job at the school in the cafeteria there. And eventually, after 3 years, I got a master's degree in art, and I won a Fulbright, and I went to Poland, and I lived in Poland, and I was painting. I wanted to be a painter, and I was in Poland painting, and I got kicked out of my studio by the bureaucratic communist regime that was there, and I started hanging out in the jazz club in Krakow. And I sat in one night with a band, and all of a sudden I had offers to be in 3 different Polish jazz groups, and that's what I did in Poland for the rest of the time I was there. I came back to San Francisco in 1965. I was offered a job at the San Francisco Art Institute teaching painting. I taught painting there, and sometime during that time I met Peter Albin, who was playing in a band called Big Brother and Holding Company. I dropped acid. I started a whole different life, and anyway, and then you know the rest.
Actually, I don't, but I'm not even interested.
But anyway,
I mean, I'm totally. Dave, I want to. Yeah.
Well, I was on the road to be a painter. And that's what really brought me to the West Coast, was to go to the San Francisco Art Institute. I wanted to get a degree. I wanted to get an art degree, and I wanted to be an artist. I didn't really want to be a musician.
Okay, I want to ask you something.
I always got gigs because people would hear me play and say, you got a great feel. We want you to play drums and everything. So even when I was, going to the Art Institute, I was playing in a lot of Dixieland bands. I was getting into like that kind of thing. I played with different people in San Francisco. The San Francisco, Dixieland or New Orleans jazz was very big in San Francisco. In that time, there was a thing called the San Francisco Revival, if you know about that. Turk Murphy,
Bob Scobie, yep,
all of those people. So that was a big style of music in San Francisco, and a lot of little bands that played that stuff. And I happened to play in that early 60s time. I played in a band with a guy named Frank Big Boy Goody, who had played with Sidney Bechet. It was a great clarinet player. Anyway, all of that stuff. So I was doing that, and I was going to art school. I was going to art school to get my master's degree. And I was playing every, once in a while with these different jazz groups and things like that at parties and gigging around San Francisco. But I really didn't want to be a musician. I wanted to be an artist. And then sometime, like I say, when I came back from Poland, which is where I was living, I came back and I dropped acid with this girlfriend of mine, and then I met Peter Albin, and then the Trips Festival thing started, and I started going to dances and all of that, and I wanted to be in a band. And I heard Big Brother and Holding Company, and their drummer was kind of weak. He was the weak link in the band. It was very obvious to me and to a lot of other people, and I would see Peter, who I met because I had a studio. I had a loft in the Mission District in San Francisco where I painted, and he was working in a silkscreen place that silkscreen T-shirts and sweatshirts down the street, and he would eat lunch in the same cafeteria downstairs that I would, and I'd see this guy with long hair, and I said, why do you have long hair? One day I was talking to him, and he said, well, I'm in a rock band. I'm in this band, Big Brother and the Holding Company. And I said, I heard of that band, and I'm going to come and hear you guys. So I went and heard them, and I heard them at this it was way before Janis, and they played, and I thought, this is an incredible band, incredible guitar player, James Gurley. Peter's great, but the drummer is terrible. Drummer's like just, barely can hold on to the beat, and it's all this energy happening in front of him, and he can't do it. He can't give them the energy. So I would see Peter, and then week after week I would say, you ought to get rid of the drummer. I play drums, and give me a shot at it. And he said, I know you play drums because I've heard you practicing upstairs. and then they fired that drummer, and they got somebody else to do a gig with them, and then they fired that guy, and they got somebody else to do one gig with them. And then the third gig that they didn't have a drummer, they called me up.
Okay, time out. I want to get in here for a second. Okay, that's very new information, because it always says everywhere there was this guy, was it Chuck Jones, the drummer, the original?
Chuck Jones.
Okay, so it just says, it always says that they dumped, Chuck was gone and you came in, but you're telling me that Albin actually really was going to hold out. I mean, he knew you had the best chops, but they tried two more cats out, it still didn't work, and then Getz got the call. Is that right?
That's right. That's exactly right. And he didn't know I had the chops. I don't think he really understood. He just, kind of heard some drumming happening upstairs, but he didn't really believe me, I think. I think they were looking for somebody who was already in some band and try to get somebody else. And the first person they got was a cat named Fritz Kasten. And Fritz was sort of a light, he was an okay drummer. He wound up playing with a band called Joy of Cooking.
Oh, yeah.
And they had a run. And then the second cat, and these are guys who just did one gig with them. The second cat they had was Norman Mayle, and Norman was good, and they liked Norman.
Right.
And they wanted him to be in the band, but then Norman had another offer from this band called Sop with Camel, and Sop with Camel had a hit called Hello, Hello, obscure 60s hit, and Norman thought, I'm going to go join the Sop with Camel. So that was, I think they wanted Norman to play in the band. They wanted Norman Mayle to be the drummer. And he said, no, I'm going to do this other band. So then, kind of in desperation, Peter, I guess, told the other guys, well, there's this guy upstairs, he's an artist, and he plays the drums. Let's, give him a call. They had a gig at a club called The Matrix. And they said, well, you got to get together with us beforehand in the afternoon. So we met at some apartment, some loft somewhere, some flat somewhere in Pacific Heights, and we played, and we started playing 2120 by the Rolling Stones was the first thing we played, and we went on. It went on for about a half an hour. The energy was like that,
I just want to go back for a second. We're on a great trip here with Dave Getz. When you talked about just becoming dedicated to the sounds of Horace Silver and Bird, well, in your mind, I just think it's absolutely, I've been searching for it, but, I was not able to sit and see Coltrane during his modal period. I couldn't hang in what is black music to you? And what does that mean? Why did you dedicate? Is it the blues? What does that mean to you? Because jazz, in my mind, the word has become so contorted. It doesn't even mean anything. It means one thing to someone and one thing to another. But when you rededicated yourself when you really got into the pursuit of the 27th Man with Horace Silver or whatever, what did that mean to you? What did that music mean to you?
It was more, it connected on a more emotional level. To me, it went deeper. It was willing to kind of get ugly and get brutal and show sides of things that, not sand off the rough edges, but really get down and dirty, and the soulfulness of it was much more extreme, The emotional content of it was to me deeper, that's all. And I still feel that way. Although I like lots of music, I like cabaret music. I like opera. I like all kinds of music.
Sure.
But when it comes to jazz, and I really the stuff that really moves me still is probably that music, and I still, you know, when I listen to some of the Horace Silver stuff, like you know, Donald Byrd's solo on Senior Blues, that's you know, it's incredible. It's just that those guys really nailed it. They really nailed it. Sonny Rollins, you know, Coltrane too. Coltrane on Kind of Blue on that period, you know, and Cannonball and all of those guys. They just nailed it. They just got really they really used their axes to explore places emotionally that other musicians weren't going. You know.
Absolutely, and we have a game on this program called Name That Tune. So settle in, Mr. Getz. We'll play this tune, and then we'll come back and break it down. Okay.
Okay.
Music on the Jake Feinberg Show, sponsored in part by the Stereo Hospital, with over 40 years of experience repairing all types of home audio equipment, from vintage table radios to digital surround sound. Located at 4044 East Speedway inside Metronome Music. It's the place to take your turntable, CD player, tape deck, heck, just about anything to do with a stereo. Call 722-4610. Ask for Jeff Brucker, one of his trusted assistants, and they'll help you out. All right, Mr. Getz, what do you got for us?
Oh, it's I haven't heard that one in a long time. Promise her anything but give her arpeggio.
Arpeggio, and I'll tell you that we were just. It had a real klezmer feel to it as well. What a gorgeous! I just love that tune, and it's nice because you went through.
What's that?
I know what I dig about that tune is just, you had to sort of be a chameleon on the drum kit there. I mean, you were playing several different thematic things, and I just, it doesn't represent the loud thrashing soul rock that Janis was in with the band. I guess my question is, I'd love you. I'm just fascinated without being a huge Big Brother aficionado. Just talk about before Janis joined the band. What were you guys doing that was progressive as a band, as it related to any other band that was doing their things in the country?
Well, that last thing that you played, that in some way represents the mindset of what Big Brother and the Holding Company was about, without Janis, before Janis, and then later after Janis, because that thing that you just played, that was like probably a late 1971 or 72.
That's right.
So, before Janis, we were like, we would play things like Hall of the Mountain King is one most people know. We just, it was like taking a theme like that, just like this last one. It's a Russian folk song,
Exactly.
That's what it really is. And taking a theme like that and playing it and then improvising with it. So we would do that, and James Gurley would take a long solo, Sam Andrew would take a long solo. We would rock on something like, the theme from Peer Gynt Suite, Hall of the Mountain King, like that. And we had other things. We had something we called it Electric Caravan. That was our name for it. We didn't have a name for it, but it was a thing where I would start like a drum beat, sort of a caravan type, kind of a fast kind of beat like that. On the tom-toms, and we would just improvise on that and just go wherever it would go. And we did folk things. Actually, we did Summertime. This is something a lot of people don't realize. Big Brother and the Holding Company, we did an instrumental version of Summertime before Janis ever joined the band.
Oh.
We also did the song Down on Me before Janis ever joined the band. She wrote some different words to it, and all of these things, she adapted herself to Big Brother rather than us adapting to her, although she brought in material also. But mainly it was loose, and we did Little Richard stuff. We did, stuff like that. We did some originals that were songs that, people had written that we knew locally. It was a mix. It was very eclectic. And it was very much focused, I'd say, more than anybody, probably around the guitar playing of James Gurley, because James was a really unique player. He really could only be James Gurley. He wasn't a guy that had a style that could adapt to other styles. He was like the opposite of whatever a session player is. He was a guy who had a unique style, and he could only do that.
Wow. I was going to say, okay, that makes sense.
And it only really fit in with certain kinds of music, which was kind of freaky, psychedelic blues, and the amazing thing was that when Janis came into the band and we did the album Cheap Thrills, that we were finally able to find vehicles for James's guitar playing, namely combination of two and ball and chain. But later on, it did become a problem, and it became one of the reasons I think Janis eventually left the band, because in some way James himself was a guy who we loved, and we all loved him, and Janis loved him, but he couldn't really adapt to new material. He couldn't really play like songs with changes, things that had changes in them, or any kind of chord beyond like a dominant seventh or anything like that. So it really was, the limitations started to show after, a couple of years. But in the very beginning, he was the focal point of the band.
Were you guys commended at that time by your peers for having the chops and the dexterity to play an amalgamation of different type of music? Prior to Janis.
I think we were. Yeah. I don't think we were considered later on when we started to travel with Janis. We were put down. I think a lot of critics put us down for our supposed lack of chops and lack of legitimate technique or legitimate kind of way of playing the blues. But in the beginning, I think we were completely accepted by the San Francisco community when we first started out as being as formidable musically as any band around,
Dave, we're going to have to just do part one here, and You know, I mean, it was such an honor to. I really, as we close up here, I just would love you to talk about in about 2 minutes your concept of leadership in this 21st century. What do you think are the most valuable skills, leadership skills, that young people need as we move into as we continue in the age of digitization?
You know, if you're talking about leadership, to me, I've worked with people who I consider, good leaders, and as a drummer is basically a support musician for the most part. Although I've led, I've had my own groups also and been a leader, but I've worked more for other leaders, for other people as a support. And a good leader to me is a guy who's you really feel he cares about his soldiers, like a general. If a guy was like a very bad soldier, if he's the kind of soldier that ran away from responsibility or split when things got rough or when it looked like, the danger was going to happen, it doesn't make for a good leader, although that's what happens a lot of times. A lot of times people become leaders because they really want control, and they want, that kind of thing. They want to be in charge. They want to be first to do everything. So they become leaders, but they're not necessarily, you don't really in some way trust them or feel that they identify with you or that they were ever in your position as a support person, as a soldier, so to speak. So I think that's a really important thing a leader, that the people under the leader have to feel in some way that they were there. They understand where you're at, and they care about you, and were you at some point, and achieved the position of leadership through their work, and because of they're excelling at what they did, and because of their greater vision of things, of being able to see a bigger picture. So that, that's just a very general thing I feel about leadership. I don't know what it means in some way in terms of like speaking like the digital age.
No. You've already made it very clear. It's a common theme about leadership, treating everyone the same, making them feel that you're all on the same page, that really you're in it for the intentions, ego's a part of it, but you're there for a vision, and you're there to lead a group. And I really thank you. I knew I was just so looking forward to this interview, because I was like, I'm just going to talk to Getz about nothing about Janis Joplin, nothing. And,
I love you for that, Jake.
I love you too, Getz. We'll do it again, man. I had a ball. I cannot thank you. I'll reach out to you later. We'll connect again.
Okay, where are you located?
I'm in the old Pueblo in Tucson.
Okay.
All right, Getz. Talk to you soon, brother.
Talk to you later.
All right, man.
Bye-bye.
We'll be right back.
Why not give us a call now and join in the discussion? 750-7456. We want to hear what you have to say.
Hello?
Power Talk 1210. This is Power Talk 1210. The power to think for yourself on KEVT AM 1210, Sahuarita, Tucson.
Folks, welcome back inside the Parisi Palace at 2919 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, hour number 2. Music on the Jake Feinberg Show brought to you by the Amity Foundation's Circle Tree Ranch. Since 1981, an internationally acclaimed, dynamic, and innovative teaching community engaged in human services and social and environmental justice. At the Amity Foundation, good people gather with good intent, and I'd like to thank Dwight Bocage and everybody at the Circle Tree Ranch for their support. Today is my first Scatico guest that I have some previous direct contact with. While most of the other cats hopped into the real world when I first donned the green and white, my guest found the time and space to carve out a few pivotal years as the 80s expired and the 90s ensued. We're in 2015 now, but my guest was a prolific figure in my division's evolution at Scatico. In 87, we had John J. Hickey, and in 88, we had Mitch Polay, two characters who tried to teach Todd Hutchinson how not to pulverize the feckless Josh Weiss. The summer of 89 was when my guest came into focus. He was sailing away with Jimmy Buffett, handing off songwriting responsibilities to Berkey, Scatico, and producing gross-out contests that had all the campers trying to outdo one another. He surrounded himself with a staff that were heavily influenced by their mentors, like Todd Bulldog Weiss, who was bulldogging his way through Hobart and making sure that all the campers stayed in line. It was a brotherhood that intermixed the instilled camp ethos of Doug Herzog and Doc Hamburg, lifers, guys who were brought up starting in Bunk 1, and individuals like Jordan Wiener and Maz Medorsky, who actually didn't start until the upper hill. That cocktail is what my guest contributed to in less bashful ways, with Bubba Weinstein and Jeff Bernfeld learning to play the dobro, twanging in Greg Rosh's ears, while my guest was riding on the storm, cranking tunes in his Jeep as the Twin Lakes faded away. My guest's greatest strength was recognizing the gifts that each camper brought to camp. He knew I was obsessing about Jack Howell's broken bat home run off Bob Tewksbury, so he egged me on to get stuff out of my system and broadcast irrelevant rec softball games. Always a smile, always bringing energy, and always heading into the other bunk. And that was okay by me, because every 2 weeks each summer, my guest's brother Ezzy would come up and play hard and infuse a Justin-Tuck attitude in my bunk, which consisted of a Felch, a spaceman, a shaky Hutch, and a squirrel. It was a ragtag bunch who might not see the chicken parm or late-night pillow fight with Danny Deutsch, who was sporting his trademark white overalls. But as we know, time is eternal, and even though I have not communicated with my guest in over 25 years, the love and humanity remains because of the nexus of Scatico. Craig Fischelberg, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Shaky Jake Feinberg, great to be reconnected, man.
It's great to hear you, man. How are you?
Great, wonderful.
Are you in the office today?
No, I'm not.
Okay, so you got the landline all worked out. That's good.
Yes.
Craig, I wanted to ask you, just right off the bat, looking back on your time, do you believe that you were an effective DL at Scatico?
Yeah, I mean, I tried to kind of take the role of, the way I was at Scatico, everything I was pretty intense about everything I did, and whenever I kind of took on a new task at camp or in life, I want to try to make the best of it and provide, a experience at camp for the kids, and that's what I tried to do. I mean, my goal as a division leader when I think I was 2 summers as a division leader, it wasn't all about the sports. There's so many kids at Scatico that there's a lot of sports stuff going on, but there's also kids that are engaged in other ways. And my goal was always to try to, it's easy to get the sports kids going, but to try to get everyone else engaged in activities that were kind of sometimes out of the box.
Right. Can you give an example of something like that?
Yeah, things like blind hikes that we used to do, where kids, everyone's eyes were covered, and you're walking through like big puddles, and you're telling the kids you're walking through streams, and you're picking up or follow the leader we used to do, or they would just follow me around, and I'd go and pick up mud and wipe it on my face, and I'd watch 20 other kids pick up mud and wipe it on their face, and things like that you can't do anywhere else. But you've got a group of kids that respect you and listen to you, and I think you can have so much fun in that environment.
I've been on this journey, and I've really reached out to not even my counselors, but guys that were older and were my counselors, but they all came, like I've been ruminating. They all came on the upper hill. I'm trying to figure out how the Fischelberg family found Scatico. So how did you find it, and then what years did you wind up starting?
Yeah, my father actually went to Scatico, and a funny story is that he went to Scatico with the Medorsky mom, Hildy Medorsky,
mm-hmm.
and it turned out so. They had gone to Scatico, 100 years ago, and then we ended up living in Upper Saddle River, New Jersey, on the same street, like 100 yards away from the Medorskys, and then we all went to camp together. So it started way back, with my father.
So, because Maz was inculcated with green and white, I mean, were you getting that pummeled in your early on? I mean, because Maz was he was just marinating in it.
Yeah, no, not really. I think that came from Mike's mom. I mean, she was all about it like that, and I remember her having just books of things and be pulling out things, and I think that's where a lot of that comes from.
Mm-hmm.
It was me more of I started young. I started probably. It was bunk 4, I think, and I don't even know how old I was, but I was kind of just shipped off and, dropped in the middle of nowhere and then, left to survive.
Right. How did you survive? I mean, talk about early, because I was the same way. I mean, my folks were like, here, you're at the bus stop, good luck, and we'll see you in 2 months. And do you remember anything early on in your camper career when you, I don't know if humbled is the right word, but when you kind of walked away and said, wow, this is definitely not Upper Saddle River anymore, and I really got to grow?
Yeah. I mean, the Lower Hill years that I remember, the first few, it was kind of doing the thing and kind of, run, like, just kind of going with the flow at Scatico. And I was involved actually a lot in nature, and I was into a lot of weird things. And then I started getting into sports. And I think the kind of defining summer for me was probably 1980 when we were juniors that year, our last year on the Lower Hill, and I think that's when things started coming together. As a kid, I had a really, I was athletic, and I did, participated in all the sports, but I definitely had a temper. I didn't like to lose. And it was the summer of 80 that, it was kind of brought to my attention that, hey, I've got a lot of things going for me,
mm-hmm.
but I really need to work this out. And that was kind of my, defining summer, so to speak.
Who helped you work it out? I mean, who brought that to your attention?
Yeah, it was amazing because, when I was going through the years, Larry Hamburg was kind of like, a Scatico legend.
Right.
You got the Manny Tunkles, then you got the Larry Hamburgs, and this, it just seemed crazy that he was going to be our division leader that summer. And that summer we had Jimmy Rosenzweig as our counselor, and Billy Goldner was our CIT.
Wow, Billy.
So excuse me?
Billy was CIT. That's great.
Yeah. So it was those guys together were it was great. I mean, watching kind of how Hamburg rolled, and Billy was just kind of learning he was almost like a big kid, really. He was kind of, getting into the swing of things, and he still, he had that Roger Daltrey painted on the back of his jean jacket and really long hair, and I was a pretty curious kid at the time, and it was kind of intrigued just by these guys and, seeing them partying and coming home late. And I think myself, Arakan, our bunk was just a pretty curious bunk, and we were always kind of into their stuff and trying to figure out what they were doing. But in the same regards, they kind of gave us back a lot, where, I Doc, Billy, they would tell me, they'd say, hey, you've got a lot going on. You've got to look and see what people are seeing when you're acting out. And that was kind of like the trigger for me. It was like, wow, yeah, look from the outside in at yourself and see what other people are seeing. And it's actually pretty embarrassing to act in some of the ways I was acting. And that kind of, that started there, and it's kind of almost, it transcends through life and into business, because you always need to be putting yourself in another person's shoes. Whether you're a business and you're selling stuff, you need to look from the customer's perspective, or even if you're just dealing with people, how are they perceiving you? And I thought it was a really powerful lesson for me, and pretty much changed my life from that point going forward.
I mean, this is profound. We're talking to Craig Fischelberg here. Do you think that truly, I think it's a lifelong thing, because the biggest bugaboo for me in my professional existence is, whether it's as a teacher or broadcaster, impresario, whatever it is people's perception of me. And I actually don't care anymore. I don't care anymore, but I know how important it is, and I know you're right. And I'm just wondering, did you really grasp it? That's a pretty significant concept to grasp at 10 years old.
Yeah, I definitely did, because it changed a lot of things. And it took most of the summer for that to hit home. And like I said, Billy, Doc, they took a lot of time with me. I mean, I was like a work in progress, because when that wasn't like, when I didn't lose my temper in a sporting event, I think they appreciated me as like an amazing kid. But I had to deal with, this demon to kind of move on. So, yeah, it really did happen at that age. And I think just, I was a mature kid, I think, and that's why I was able to listen to them. And I tried to be, going back to your original question as a division leader, I tried to always, and even with my kids today, like, I don't try to talk to them as if I'm, the authority figure. I try to kind of talk at their level, and I try to do that at camp too, where someone does something wrong, and you're having a discussion with them, and it's kind of trying to figure out what it is that working the problem out with them, but on their level, not like condescending.
I want to go a little bit deeper here. Like, can you give an like, when you say Hamburg worked through a lot of stuff with you? I mean, were you at the chum table talking about it? How would he work things through with you? Because this guy just sounds like an avatar of sorts.
Yeah, and he's kind of like Dave Fleischner, where he had that calming voice, and he was always in control. Just a great leader, and it would have to be when I was like in this situation. We just lost a basketball game. I take the basketball and I wail it into the woods, and then I just run off.
Right.
It's getting me at that point in the heat of the moment, and and Billy too. They both were amazing and took the time, but it was grabbing me, and it was as I'm running away to my bunk and grabbing me, and pointing out and just saying, like, almost yelling at me, like, you got to see what's going on here. I mean, you can't do this kind of stuff, and it was it was a real powerful experience coming from people you respected as well. I mean, obviously, it took all summer, and, I looked up to these people, and what they were telling me, it wasn't like my parents telling me it. It was people that, that were becoming friends of mine.
Well, what's cool is that Billy was really working through his own issues at that time too. So it was almost like an evolution where you were, the younger brother. Billy was a little bit older, and then Hamburg was kind of the. But I know, the thing is, did you, after that summer, you came back as an inner, finished out? Would you see those cats and they'd come up to you summers later and say, Craig, you're doing it, man. You've made a lot of progress. Would they reinforce that again, and so you knew you were really making forward momentum?
It was really, at the end of that summer, it was done. There was no more of that period, so it was never anything. All it was from the summer of 80 on is just building relationships. That was really pushed behind, and really never to surface again. I mean, unless I'm playing chess with my son, and he's beating me, and I dump the board. But besides that, it's pretty much been under control. And I think from there, it was really just then relationship building. Like, that's another thing about, like, my situation's a little unique, because it seemed like throughout, from the time I was a kid and on, I was spending most of my time with older people. I was really, I got really friendly with Billy and Doc and Danny and all these guys, and I was always the youngest guy, but there were so many times we would get together outside of camp. Billy and I, from the time I think I was 13 on, would go away together on weekends on ski trips.
Oh, man.
We stayed one summer we visited Greg Danford, and we'd stay at Middlebury College when he was in college. I used to go visit Billy in college when he was at Lehigh. There were so many like skiing or just like extracurricular camp gatherings, and in most of those cases, I was really the youngest one there.
But you still felt completely. I mean, that's what when I talked to Danny last weekend, I brought up Scoo, and he's like, he's like, yeah, literally he was younger than me in age, but it never even dawned on me that he was that age. And that's what I loved about Scatico. And it did start, I was in a haze, Aratan did a fantastic job of rallying the troops, and but the first couple years at camp were a little bit perfunctory. But the thing I do remember is just this, there was a real positive energy that you brought to the table. I mean, for me specifically, just you seemed that you were always looking to find the qualities in each kid that made them special, and then you would really try to enhance that. You weren't necessarily into pushing kids to do things they didn't like to do, but rather accentuate those positives. Am I right in that analysis? Yeah,
definitely. I mean, my goal was for everyone in that division to have a good time, and to do that, you've got to do a lot of different things to kind of cover everyone's bases. And it's not always going out and playing basketball, football, softball. It's doing these other things. It's having these, activities where, where you come up with creative things. Those are the things a lot of times that you remember, whether it's the campouts or the overnights or I remember we did one summer, and I don't know if it was your summer, but I pretended I wrote a letter to myself, and we got it, and it was about like these jewels that were buried in the graveyard.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah.
Was that your summer?
Definitely. Well, you were with us 2 years, so it was one of those summers. It was absolutely one of these. I know exactly what you're talking about.
And to me, that's the epitome of those kind of activities where. So then I get this, you guys are all gathered around me. I'm opening this letter, and I'm like, wow, oh man, one of my great uncles is buried with all of these jewels right over in the cemetery next door. And you guys are all fired up, and, yeah, we got to go. Let's get the shovels. We'll go at night, and, we go over there at night. And And the whole thing was we had like squirrel, my brother, and bulldog in the woods. And when the signal was, okay, let's start digging, and they're supposed to run out. And I had to say it like 3 times because they were probably busy in the woods doing who knows what.
Yeah, right. Distracted.
And you guys are like, come on, we got to start digging. We got to start digging. But it's activities like that kind of bring everyone together. And you don't have to be the best athlete. And you don't have to be any of that. And that's kind of I always look for things like that. And at Scatico.
Let me. What about that resourcefulness? I mean, was that something that was ingrained in you? Because you think about it, Dogger, your brother, Squirrel, and there was Eric Paritsky. There were other cats involved too, but it's like you didn't really need to say. Everybody was really in sync, and I just I wonder about the idea, like when you were able to get us all around in a group. We were all fixated on you. You were driving some sort of thesis that wasn't even true, but yet you created something out of nothing, and then it turned into this incredible thing. I talked about it with Dave. I know that's one interview you listened to, that constant organic creativity, and I just wonder that was always a natural thing for you, because I do remember you just basically saying you'd walk out of the bunk with the trademark shorts, maybe the boxers coming out underneath the shorts, and next thing you know, you just made something out of nothing, and everybody's having a ball.
Yeah, and I always like to try to take things to like that total upper level.
Yeah.
Whether it's pulling a practical joke or just having fun with something like that. And the bunk that I grew up in as a camper with Aratan, and there was Matt Medorsky and Lawrence Max, and it wasn't. We were a pretty creative group as well. It also wasn't all about sports, and we all really enjoyed the other things at Scatico. And I think that I think that was somewhat of a motivation. We had a really creative group, and the other guy that was in there who you should probably try to reach out to at some point was James Diener.
Oh, definitely.
He's the manager of like Maroon 5 or something.
Well, Aratan hit me to him, but I'm still. I mean, he's. I got to get to Diener, but today we're in the pocket with Craig Fischelberg, and it is just exhilarating to. Was I dreaming, or did at some point I come visit you in Ann Arbor in college?
Did you?
I don't just I thought one time when my folks went to Ann Arbor. We used to. I mean, that was my way of communicating with you back then as a camper. I was like, "Yo, my folks went to Ann Arbor," and then you were going there as well. But I thought sometime there was a picture of us, maybe, just hanging out somewhere on campus. But where are you? Are you in Chicago now?
Yeah, I'm in Chicago.
All right. So here's the question is, when was the last time you were at Scatico?
Yeah, kind of embarrassed to say. It's been a long, long time. I probably in the 90s.
Mm-hmm. No, I want to ask you, it's been a long time for me, too. I'm leading into something. So your kids never have gone there, right, at all?
Right, yeah.
And so is that, okay, so because do you think that they'd go there if you lived in the tri-state area? I only ask this because even Doug Herzog, he says, my wife is Roman Catholic, the farthest thing from the Jewish culture, and she can't bear to be without her kids for more than a week at a time. So it's like, fundamentally, I just feel like, my parents were gleeful to let me go. But would you even send your kids now? Would your wife be cool with that?
Yeah, I think you kind of hit it on the nail. I think it was a combination of, geographically removed, and I think that made it more of a challenge. And the truth is, it's selfish. I love spending time with my kids,
mm-hmm.
and to give up the summer, the 2 months without them would have been really tough, because we've had great summers as a family, and but it's a tough trade-off, because I think at Scatico or at camp in general, there's just so much like social learning that happens, and the fact now that they turn you off from cell phones and things like that, I think is so healthy at this stage of the game. And like one thing that always amazed me, like at camp, is you'd go up there for 2 months of the year, you'd leave camp, you'd spend all your time, back at school for 10 months. But no matter what happened, it's in that 2-month period, every person at camp better than you knew your best friends from home.
Absolutely.
And I don't know how it all plays out, like just, all that time there, but it always amazed me. And you go through life and you meet all these different networks of friends, and when you reconnect with someone from Scatico, it's like it's such a different level, and my kids won't have that. So there's definite trade-offs in it, I think.
Well,
I'm actually Madorsky's kids, and I follow what Chase is doing, and it's just, I mean, there's so much upside to it, but.
Well, I mean, even now, I'll say this, with full disclosure, it's like, my daughter Hannah, my older daughter, is 9.5. She's percolating. She's on fire. She's ready to go. They've done like a 1 week, a 4 week, an 8 week. So they have these tiered programs now. I mean, I'll be honest with you, Craig. For 1 week, my wife is cool with 1 week, but we can't afford 1 week. I mean, they've priced a lot of cats out of the market too. I mean, there's not a lot around that, but I just know that there was a gritty underbelly. I mean, whether it was Upper Saddle River, Englewood Cliffs, people came from nice families, upper middle class. There was a lot of blue collar mentality there, a lot of grit, and a lot of people from very diverse backgrounds. Even and so now it seems to me it's like, unless you are, Fortune 500, you're not going to be able to afford your send a kid to camp. That to me, especially Scatico. I mean, I don't know if I just I'm interviewing Bert Holman next weekend, and he just sent me an article about Pontiac. They had one of their bunks burned down this year because too much stuff was plugged into the walls. Thankfully, no one was injured. But
man.
No, it's not even. I'm not even asking a question here. I think what I'm getting at is.
No, I see what you're saying, and I do agree, and I think that's why, like, if you look back at camp now, and I'm still in touch with people, and I hear about all, but it seems like there's so many people from my generation that are at camp now, working at camp, almost, there to help support probably the financial obligation of sending the kids.
Yeah, listen, I mean, I might edit this out of the broadcast, but I'm literally going to ask Dave, like, I want so desperately to send Hannah to my daughter to camp, because even though we live in Tucson, and I think it's great that you love spending a lot of time with your kids, but the fact is I can't do it, and I'm going to have to be like, yo, man, I just, I could ask him to cut me a deal, but I don't even feel right about that. It just seems to me. You asked about why there was a difference between home friends and what happened at camp, or even college friends. And I look at it and I say, it was because your mentors, people I looked up to, there was no time for cliques. Yeah, cliques developed. I get that. But if you were the really the headiest counselors that you knew, guys that were older than you, they eliminated all of that crap. So at the end of the day, you all felt like you were kind of operating on the same level. And I really believe that when you go home, you can get dissed, you can get made fun of, you can do this, that, and the other thing. You're taking the bus instead of having a car. So it's all splintered up. And at camp, it was like, you may not be the coolest kid in the world, but you knew that if you pulled any stuff, that your counselors were going to come down hard on you. And because everybody was in it together. I mean, you're all living in that bunk together. And so that would be my answer to that, to the idea of why camp in that 2 months was just so stimulating,
Yeah, no. One other comment I'll make about camp, and I think that this is, oftentimes you talk about role models and you build yourself. I think, first off, that junior summer, I think when you went back and you said, I had all these kids around me, I think that, like, those years, like it was like 10, 11, 12 are the prime years, I think, to be a counselor at Scatico, because you've got kids you can still, that are kind of figuring it out, that you can mold, and that can be influenced, and it's amazing. But I think with Scatico, it's not like so much about Scatico when I was there, and I think I was a smart kid. I saw what was going around me. I was very aware of things. You're not only picking up, things that you respect that people do, but you're also seeing things that you don't appreciate.
Mm-hmm.
and it works on both ways in terms of defining how are you going to be a person. What are you comfortable doing? What are you not comfortable doing? What do you see these people doing or that you're not happy with, that you don't ever want to do?
We're talking to Craig Fischelberg here, waxing poetic here on a Saturday afternoon. Do you find yourself, when you talk to your brother, do you guys still talk about things at camp?
Oh, yeah, there's definitely, I mean, we talk about, like, people, and did you hear this about that person or hear about that person? And we were in Scatico for that big reunion, so we were, in, like, last March, which was great to reconnect with so many people.
Right.
But, yeah, we do talk about Scatico, yes.
And I would love if you could, I didn't realize he was actually in your division, but could you weave a good Jeff Aratan story right now?
Jeff Aratan, he is a couple things about the fat man, as we call him. I remember he came that summer of 1980, and he was one of those kids that did not, he was a great softball pitcher, but sports weren't his thing. But he brought so much more from the music side, from the creativity side, and he was a great friend. And I even lived with him in Boston after college, actually, for a year or two.
Really? What was going on? What was going on there?
We crossed paths in Boston and lived together. But one thing that he was on, I don't know if you ever knew about this, but he was one summer was kind of screwed up because he was on the him and I think Lawrence Max, and they were on the canteen steps at a social.
Right.
And the steps collapsed.
Really?
And I think Aratan broke his nose in the process.
Oh no! This is unbelievable.
And, his nose was really big with the broken nose, and he had to kind of deal with that all summer. I think I can say that the reason I wasn't on those steps was I was probably about 150 to 200 yard line at the social, right?
No, I would have been right with Aratan. So you were out on the golf course, and was he wearing like one of those Bill Lane beer face masks the rest of the summer?
Yeah, I mean, it was a mess, yeah, and it was a real mess. But that was like a defining moment of the story of the summer. I don't even know. I don't know if they tried to spun color war break around that.
Right.
But it was. I mean, it was really scary. Like those steps are pretty high, and the thing just collapsed.
What was your favorite part about being a general? I think you were a general in '88. I remember basically, or is that right? Am I wrong or right about that?
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah.
And I just remember I knew usually that was before you were my DL, but I sort of knew you as obviously a highly competitive but very energetic person. And then it seemed like you totally went through this change, obviously during Color War. And what was your favorite part about? Was it just taking on that new role? Tell me a little bit about that.
As a camper, I loved Color War. I mean, it was just the intensity of it kind of matched my intensity, and it was kind of like the peak of the summer. At the same time, I always dreaded it because it was a sign that the summer was coming to a close. Right. So it was very mixed feelings throughout that. But as a general, and I was a captain in '84, and then a general, and I was always green, I should say. But it's phenomenal. I mean, you get to work with not just your group, but you're really working with half the camp, from the youngest up to the oldest, and it's just so much fun. I mean, the kids are so into it. Everybody's everyone's super engaged, and it's just fun in camp competition. You generally only get that at inter camps when you're playing other camps, but the whole experience is just great, and watching the kids kind of take the intensity level up a notch, and knowing kind of the issues I had, as a kid, that was always a very dangerous time for me with Color War when I was going through all that, because, the intensity was so high. You had And I loved how the younger kids were coached by the older kids, and it just brought the whole camp together in a great way to close out the summer.
One final question for you, Craig Fischelberg. We wrap part one here. If you can believe, we've already been cooking for about 40 minutes. But what are your thoughts about the head counselor of boys side, Corey Schwartz? He's come a long way.
Yeah, I think that's amazing. When I heard that, I always thought, like, when I was at camp, like Danny Deutsch would have been a perfect person for that role. And I think with Corey, primarily my fault. Like, I kind of lost touch with a lot of you guys after that last summer in '91. But I mean, Corey, an intense kid, he was so amazing as a kid, and I see him now, and I know you guys are all in touch, and he's in touch with so many people, and I think it's amazing, and I love seeing the photography work he's doing. Yeah. But I think it's such a great thing for the camp, like to have someone like that at the front. It really is. It was, Dave did it like that for a while, and I think Dave provided that needed, because before Dave they had this guy Lenny, and he was kind of really like almost like too army, and I think Corey's a great choice for that. I'm really excited for him and the camp, and I also think Carrie Berkman on girls' side is amazing too. She's a real fun person.
I don't think. Are you telling me she's in charge of? I don't think I realized that. She's in charge of girls' side now. Yeah,
that's what I heard. I think effective this summer coming up.
All right, now listen. Before I let you go, but I'm gonna have to dial up Amtrav this summer. Me and you are taking a helicopter into Scatico to see Color War break. All right, me and you.
I'm in, definitely.
Hey, Craig, man, we'll talk soon. Thank you. It was a ball, man. Thank you for taking the time, man.
You bet, Jake. Take care, buddy.
All right, talk to you soon. We'll be right back. Folks, welcome back inside the studios high above 2919 East Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show on Power Talk 1210. Hour number 2, we've already heard from Big Brother in the Holding Company and Janis Joplin's drummer Dave Getz, and then we just heard from former Scaticonian, used to be my counselor, actually, my DL, Craig Fischelberg, and it's an honor now, really. Before the Christmas holiday, I walked into a tea shop that my wife loves. My wife is Taiwanese. She's from Donggang, and she loves this tea shop because it makes her feel like home. And she said it's very tasty, but it's also near a very spicy Chinese restaurant, and it's also near a nail shop. So she came home and told me one day, honey, I really love this place. It's very relaxing. So I went in there. I said, I'm going to get her a gift card. I'm going to get you a gift card for the Christmas holiday, and I met Victoria, and Victoria said that they didn't have gift cards, so we had a wonderful talk, and I must say that's not why I brought them on here. I brought them on because I just think it's not only is it a cool store, but the whole business model is totally legitimate, and I'd just like to introduce my guest from Chatime. Victoria, tell me your name one more time.
It's Kim.
Kim, what's your full name?
My full name is... It's weird to say it, though.
Okay, no problem. Wo Jiao Jie Ke. So, Kim, how did you come to the United States?
I came here as an international student, and I started off in high school in Indiana, and then I moved to Seattle, and then I moved here.
I mean, what gave you the what was the idea behind Chatime? Because it's not like there's other boba tea shops around, but why? What was the idea behind that?
You know, me personally, I love to have like good drinks and food, and I grew up in Asia, so I knew how the real boba tea tastes like.
Mm-hmm.
And even though we have a lot of places that sell boba here, but to me, it's not authentic. So that's why me and my friend did a research, and we found out that Chatime has been in business for 10 years. And in Taiwan, there are a lot of competitors that sell in boba tea too, but they still survive and successful. So that's why we go ahead and go with it.
Where in Taiwan did you grow up?
I didn't grow up in Taiwan.
Where did you grow up?
Vietnam.
In Vietnam. Interesting. Thank you for reminding me. Yaru, my wife, she said that the taste was very authentic. I don't want you to give away any secrets, but I know there's tapioca. I mean, those. Yeah, right. Is there a mic on? Yeah. No, but location wise, and I grew up in New York, so I've been to other China. I'm not equating Fort Lowland Campbell to Chinatown, but it is cool. It's really cool, and that I don't know who made that decision to invest in that real estate, but that is brilliant because as far as I'm concerned, that is authentic Szechuan Chinese food. So you're gonna get white cats, but you're also gonna get a lot of Chinese, a lot of Asian people, and they're gonna filter into the tea shop and then the nail shop as well. You're gonna take credit for that idea?
Actually, yeah, me and my friend looking around for locations. At first, we thought that one of the location near the Beyond Bread. But I told him, like, why don't you pick the location next to the Chinese restaurant? Because I thought that the shoe store already moved. So if we pick that location, first thing first, we don't have to do a lot of advertisement. And we're going to get a lot of, at least the Asian customers and, people that are curious about boba tea. And, yeah, we just picked the place out of, a lot of thoughts.
It's not overly sweet. That's the other thing. Westerners love sweet. The balance is very tasty. Victoria, let me bring you in here because you're the one that I talked to. What was your experience with boba tea prior to working at Chatime?
So my experience was very limited. I had boba before in my life. I always liked it, but it wasn't until I got to Chatime and started with the training that I realized how it was actually supposed to taste, and I got that authenticity that came with working at Chatime. So yeah, I was very limited. I grew up in California and in Phoenix, so there wasn't a lot of boba in my life.
But it is amazing there are huge Asian populations in California and
Yes.
in Phoenix for that. I'm actually amazed at how big the Chinese. Are you amazed at how big the Chinese community is here? I mean, it's not China, okay, but it's big. It's not Los Angeles, but it's legit. I mean, I know all my friends are Chinese.
Yeah, I honestly, I was surprised how many Chinese people that I can see here, because I went to the U of A. I used to be an international student, so I have to take a lot of classes with other international students too. But I wouldn't imagine how many people come here from China, and they came in and they saw me and they started speaking Chinese, like they just saw someone that actually from their homeland, and it's just my Chinese is really rusty, so please don't speak Chinese.
Oh,
to
yeah,
me.
no, it's good for you. You can. No, I mean that's what I was so thankful because I mean, yeah, we wouldn't have stayed. We've lived in Tucson. I met Yaru here. We'll never leave unless I get a better gig somewhere. But it's like, I mean, for so many Chinese students, they miss their home. They miss the street market. I've been to Taiwan 4 times. I mean, the street food and the culture and the smells and the drinks and the people. But then to go somewhere and to be at peace is just so essential. And now all these international students are coming to me. It's like when do you find it to be exceptionally busy? At night after dinner, do people come in or during the day?
So we usually have a rush around lunchtime. or just after lunchtime, and then in the evening. So after dinner, we even get some rushes as late as 9 or 10 o'clock.
Tell me a couple of things that you've learned about. I don't want to say yourself, but what have you learned? How has your knowledge expanded since working there?
As far as boba,
not in the drink part of it. I mean, just the exposure to different types of people. I mean, were you always around very diverse people, or because I mean, you're dealing with. Yeah. Anyway, take it from there. It's free, free association.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we do deal with a lot of diversity. Sometimes it's a struggle because there's a huge language barrier a lot of times because what is it? 7 out of 8 of our staff, 7 out of 10 of our staff don't speak Chinese. We only have one who's one of our employees is from China. So other than that, we've got to deal with the language barriers, but it's been amazing seeing these students coming in or people in general coming in and they're like, oh my gosh, I haven't had this in 5 years, 6 years, 20 years. And now I get to, get a taste of home or a taste of my vacation in Taiwan. And it's just really given us the opportunity to bring that to people.
Oscar, have you ever had boba tea before?
I think I have.
What do you think you know? Tell me more.
I mean, I think I have the fake stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's one right up the road. Let's just break it down. Why is that one less? Why is it? What do the customers say? The one on Campbell and yeah.
Do you want me to take this one?
Yeah. Go ahead.
So I think the biggest difference, the thing that really sets us apart is we are constantly making fresh ingredients. We're brewing teas throughout the day. We're making boba. Our boba process is 2 hours long, just to get that perfect texture and that perfect sweetness. And so I think that's really what sets us apart. We have a lot of customers who have made the switch to Chatime, and mostly it's just because they're looking for that authenticity.
Did you in Seattle? Was there a boba shop that you kind of modeled this one after?
No. This one is my design.
Your design?
Yeah.
So the brewing, where did you get the concept?
No, I mean, Chatime is a franchise from Taiwan. So I had to go to Taiwan and study for it in 3 weeks. And
3 weeks?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they make us learn everything from the bottom up. So they make us learn how to make drinks, how to operate, how to take care of inventory, how to market, marketing stuff, and, like everything that you would learn in a business. I have to study that in 3 weeks. And then after I come back, they did send us a, a print.
Oh.
No, a print that, we have to.
A template?
Yeah, to set up the store,
Sure,
just like
sure.
The way that they want it. But I told them, like, no, I want to do it my way.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
You got to live with yourself. I mean, you don't want to walk in there and say, I hate the way this looks.
Yeah, and then like I told them like this is too boring, and this looks so alike other Chatime in any Chatime that I've been to.
Yeah.
So I want something different, and I changed a little bit the table, like the decoration and everything. It's just like I just keep the front, the cashier front, like the same like they want it. Because I
raise the tables a little. The height of the counters is a little higher.
Yeah. I mean, like, because I know that my employee is going to be like big people. I don't want that.
Yeah, right. No, so have you developed like this is fascinating. I'm very into communication. How do you communicate? How does it work with the 7 out of 10 that don't speak Chinese? I mean, do you have hand signals or
No, so our menu is written in both Mandarin and in English.
Cool,
and we have little to-go menus, so a lot of times our customers are really good. Most of the time they can order in English. Every now and then we have a couple communication errors, but and then if they can't, they just point to what they're ordering on this one of our little menus. And so we haven't had too many problems with it. But
how did you find Victoria? Because when I walked in there, this woman gave me the most exceptional service, and Oscar knows I ask a lot of questions, and I'm always vetting things, and I wasn't upset. It's just I was confounded that this most amazing place that clearly hit home with my wife did not have any gift cards. So how did you find Victoria?
Well, she started off as my friend. So
How did you meet her?
Through
Your husband and my boyfriend went to school together.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
At U of A or?
no, actually
I think
at
it's
Pima.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
a couple years ago already.
Yeah, and then like finally, and I told her boyfriend and her that I'm opening a shop, so if they're interested.
Mm-hmm.
And then like and she would work for me since she working on her master degree, and it's like okay, cool. And then how it happened.
Chatime is located at 1800 East Fort Lowell, Suite 140, 520-777-8096. I mean, you have some 40 feedbacks on Yelp, and it's basically over 4.5 stars. I mean, are you able to sit back ever? I mean, I know that I know enough about Asian people and culture that they rarely take their foot off the pedal. I mean, it's always go, go, go. They wear it as a badge of honor. But have you been able to sit back and stop and smell the roses a little bit, or are you just sort of just moving forward?
Honestly, sometimes I do look back.
No, in the moment, not look back. I'm saying just stop and smell the roses, to stop and marinate and say, I'm doing this. I have created something that is my own.
Well, I wouldn't say it all on me because I do have partners and I do have employees that help me. So I wouldn't take all the credit into my account. And I do see that, we are on the way. Like, we're rolling really fast. We just opened for 6 months, and now it's getting really crazy at my place. And I always tell my employees that no matter how bad you feel on that day, don't take it out on the customers. That's my biggest.
That's such a great point. Well, I mean, I as a teacher for 8 years, I can say I didn't follow that all the time. I mean, it's a really, I mean, you come in with your own personal stuff, then you have to keep that mental focus. And I'm not speaking as a prophet because it's something that I still is it something that you have you been able to modulate that? Is it something that comes naturally to you? I'm talking to Victoria as far as being able to just drop that.
Yeah. Sometimes it is a little bit difficult, but when we get in there and our customers are so great, and I like to sit there, and I'm the assistant manager, so I like to reflect on how things are going. How are our employees handling things? How are things going with the whole staff, and how are we doing? And I think for me, it's a little bit easier to reflect on that and say, hey, we're making. I look more for progress rather than perfection.
Sure.
And so I look at that and I'm saying, hey, this month these are the things we want to focus on doing. And then at the end of that month, hey, we did a really good job here. We didn't do such a good job here, but it's a lot easier for me because I don't have to deal with everything with owning the shop. Like for Kim, it's probably pretty difficult, but for me, I'm able to focus on what's going well and what do we need to work on. And I do find that it's easier for me to kind of distance I walk into work and I'm like, okay, I'm at work.
Right. Now, talk about something, Kim, you can jump in if you want, but Victoria, something that you would like to make progress on by the end in the next 6 months or so at the store. What do you have what is in your mind?
So for me, a big thing that I've been trying to push is getting our name out there. So right now, we haven't done an exact demographic write-up of our customers, but it's pretty clear. We're probably like 80-90% Asian customers. So for me, I would really like to expand this out, get more people involved in it, because even if you don't like the tapioca pearls, there's something for everyone there. I mean, we have smoothies, we have juices, it's just really good quality teas, and we've got great toppings as well, but I'd really like to branch out.
You have free Wi-Fi in there?
We
do.
Yeah, no, maybe Oscar and I can get onto iTunes over there, huh?
Let's do it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's, well, I can tell you one thing. I am, anytime, my wife is a pretty flexible person, but she has really high standards when it comes to food, like you said, and to drinks. And she knows the difference between the real deal and something that's trying to be like that or trying to compensate for more Western palates. And I give you a whole bunch of credit for bringing in the right people and also procuring the right methods to make authentic drinks. And again, like I said, I'm not equating it to San Francisco or New York City, Chinatown, but with the way Tucson's growing and with the amount of international students, I just think you've hit a grand slam. And I'm so, it actually, when you find something in society that makes so much sense, at least for me, I try to highlight that stuff. I believe in that. I believe in love. So, I mean, I really thank you. I thank you for coming in, both of you, today, and look forward to having you come back in the future and promote anything you want. You know, you should view this as a platform and an opportunity for you to talk about how you guys are continuing to grow.
Yes, thank you so much for having us.
It was an honor.
Thank you.
Yeah, bukachi. Hey, so that wraps up another edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, and we will be back next week at the same time, noon to 2, on Power Talk 1210 KEVT. Thank you to Oscar for running the board, and we'll see you all next week.
Oh, the cuckoo, she's a pretty bird, and she warbles when she flies, but she never hollers cuckoo till the 4th day of July. She jacket diamonds, well, jacket diamonds, oh, I know, honey, you robbed me of my silver, and I know I'm a gold, I'm a gold.